Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching the Ding Political Vigilante Vegan Guns from Gotham City. We have discussed on this show how the American empire is collapsing in real time. And there's some similarities to like other empires that have collapsed, like Rome. But there's things that are very different because no other time in history has an empire had the ability to destroy the whole planet, except now. And a great way to support our show, speaking of collapsing empires, is go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood, and you can send in videos and articles like this was sent in by LN on Patreon. I want to show you this video. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but we're going to get a little taste of what this is talking about. And then we're going to bring on Ron Placone to discuss this video. So here it is. Are we living through the end of an empire? I would say, yes, we are.
Throughout the well-worn pages of history, empires have risen, grown to prominence, and collapsed into the mist of time. The Roman Empire, stretching from the sweltering sands of Africa to the murky woods of northern England. The British Empire and her dominance of the Seven Seas. Radio Shack. All of these and more have become the stuff of legend, each with their own stories of success, expansion, and ultimately collapse, unable to bear the weight of their inherent contradictions. But are all empires destined to meet this fate? And the question on everyone's mind, probably because it's the title of this video, are we living through the end of an empire? In this episode, we'll take a look at the precarious position of the United States and consider some historic parallels to assess whether the US is really in decline. All right, here we go. I'm ready. Nope, it's terrible. All right, I'm ready. Rome. Or are we doing this as two takes? Okay, here we go. I'm ready. Rome. The empire all other empires aspire to be. From their breathtaking architecture, to their lavish feasts, to their penchant for feeding people they don't like to wild animals, Rome is truly the shining example of what other nations can only hope to accomplish. We can't really talk about empires or empires in decline without talking about the Roman one. And it just so happens that Americans, from politicians to far-right history YouTubers, love to compare the US to Rome. So, is there something to this comparison? Is the US the new Rome? In a lovely bit of cosmic irony, the first book of Edward Gibbon's ambitious 6-volume work, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, was published in 1776, on the eve of the birth of a new empire, one that would go on to become arguably the most powerful in history. In some ways, the United States and the Roman Empire do have a lot in common.
But whom, dear Copernicus? My new Rome.
An insatiable desire for expansion, extreme inequality, a globe-spanning network of influence, a penchant for chattel slavery, military dominance, and decadent displays of wealth. There have been countless books, essays, political diatribes, and social media posts earnestly comparing the United States to Rome, and often for good reason. Both empires were bogged down in endless wars, both displayed a shocking level of wealth inequality, both suffered economic crises that commentators in both eras were certain would spell the final end of the golden age of civilization. And if we're being honest, both had about the same response to disease outbreaks, which is to say those in power let a whole lot of people die and isolated themselves as best they could. But we should also note that a lot of the people making these comparisons are only doing it because they have this weird thing about mythologizing the United States. It's a very young country, comparatively speaking. So what better way to afford it a little extra grandeur than giving ourselves the title of the New Rome, the shining city on a hill, the glorious republic that commands the world itself. That fits very nicely into the whole manifest destiny, American exceptionalism thing. We'll get back to that towards the end of the video. But first, we need to address what the end of an empire actually looks like.
Making a change is never easy, but having Zen shipped directly to your door
All right.
makes it more convenient.
So we don't want to watch that whole thing, but let's bring Ron Placone on, former host of Get Your News On with Ron. They still do the show every once in a while. And also the new podcast, 1,000 with Ron Placone. Here he is, Ron Placone. Boom.
Hey, Graham.
How are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. Yeah.
So You and I have talked about this, numerous times on our shows and in private and in watching that video. And, America is really, if there was a how to collapse an empire playbook, America would be following it page by page. And you're a well-read guy, and you've got a pretty decent knowledge of history yourself. So how do you see, our American empire collapsing compared? How is it similar and how is it different to the Roman collapse?
Well, I mean, I think it's too early to say exactly how similar it'll be.
Mhm.
I mean, like, so far, it's like we're marrying not just Rome, but basically any empire. I mean, it's all the same thing. I mean, and by the way, we're also, I mean, I enjoyed that video, but when he said, "Oh, we're a young country," like, yeah, in comparison, the United States, as we know it, is a young country. But as far as empires go, we're right at that 250-year mark, which is very typical. Like that's usually the run. It's about 250 years. So we're pretty much right at that mark. And so I mean, I hope, my big hope is that it's like like a gentle fall, and it could be, it might not be, but like it could just be a gentle fall where the United States is just another country, which
Like
the
what
entire
happened to England. Basically, England kind of had a gentle fall. They didn't just collapse and lose everything. They had all these, territories or whatever you want to call them. The sun never set on the Union Jack. And then, but they spread their themselves too thin, and it was really the Suez Canal in the 1950s that kind of really financially kind of crippled them, but they didn't have this just chaos in the streets collapse.
Yeah. Whereas Rome, they had the chaos in the streets, and then, more recent, you look at stuff that happened in Egypt and places like that, like kind of the mini turbulence there, they had a lot of chaos in the streets. So that's what I'm hoping doesn't happen here. Although, like, with the way inequality's going, we look more like Rome. I mean, not that that wasn't happening in the British Empire. Of course it was. But I mean, we are like, we're past medieval peasants. Like by scale, like we are past, like, it's like the robber barons had like it wasn't this crazy. Like we have less vacation time than medieval peasants. I mean, it's really freaking bad. A great place to like really get a good scale of comparison is David Garrett's podcast, The Dollop, where they really, I mean, they take those snapshots of history and really unpack them and then compare them to today, and it's very funny, but it's so freaking accurate that it's like, yeah, we are definitely, I think, closer to Rome. And I mean, I hope that's not the way it all shakes down, because but I kind of am worried it will be, because I think it's getting to the point where people are not able to get food. I covered this story today on Status Quo, out in Pennsylvania, in a part, like, I think in the middle of the state. This county basically sold their water rights. They privatized the water, and now a bunch of people, their water and sewage went up so high, they're getting calls, officials are getting calls from constituents saying, "I'm peeing in my backyard now because I can't afford to flush my toilet if I want to buy groceries." That's how bad it's getting.
God.
That's the start. I mean, and it's already happening. Look, I live in Los Angeles. Well, we both live in Los Angeles. I'm noticing more armed guards in grocery stores. Why is that? It's because they're preparing for that day where more people are going to be in a situation where they're like, I either go and I steal food or I go hungry. And if you have kids at home who are freaking hungry,
You're
what are you
stealing
going to
food.
do? I'm sure as hell stealing food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't let my kids go hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like you're going to have more people in that situation, and they're going to, like, they're going to do what they have to do to survive. And we already have a police force who's willing to kill on the order. That they're hungry to kill on the order. I mean, that's been proven over the years. We have a military who, they've already said, like, they'll turn them on the people on a dime. Keep in mind, this country was under martial law just a few years ago. So I mean, I could see it getting very, very ugly. And we're already seeing the early warning signs. And then also domestically and culturally, we're seeing all the warning signs of fascism turned up to 11. So, I mean, unfortunately, there's all of the symptoms of a not graceful fall. So I would love to see that change.
Yeah, so would I, because if it does go big, hard, ugly collapse, that's scary. I mean, that is a scary collapse when there's no rule, law, and order, and then the government says martial law and imposes really strict regulations. And if people can't eat, like you say, this is the most heavily armed country ever. So, to your point of, look, if somebody can't feed their kids, and some armed rent-a-cop at a Ralph's isn't going to stop 10 guys with AR-15s coming in going, we're coming to eat,
Sure.
and there's all these other indicators. I was just watching a video that a lot of food banks in America they're running out of food. Like they can't food banks, which means there's two things happening. There's a high demand, and then there's not enough people who have money to give excess food to a food bank. And that's the inflation in the groceries. And you and I have talked about just Americans could be food insecure pretty easily. And that, not to mention, there's all these other factors. There's the commercial real estate bubble, which is about to break, will trickle into the residential real estate bubble. You've got, this government and the central banks printed roughly $3 trillion just during the pandemic. And we could have a whole nother financial collapse in any number of sectors, like we had in 2008. Could be worse than 2008, which, if there's people don't have food, and then there's like a run on the banks kind of thing where you got 5,000 in the bank and the bank's like, we can only give you $300, then there's going to be chaos. And like you say, this government will take its cops and its military, and it'll be.
Oh yeah, I mean, when people talk about like an armed resistance, I mean, I'm just listening to them, and I'm like, you are insane. I mean,
Yeah.
you're saying that just regular people are going to be able to go up against the most militarized police force in the world, and against one of the largest, most weaponized militaries in the world, both of whom will crush anybody. And I it's already happened. I mean, you're hearing these stories. I mean, there was that story, I think it was in Texas, but there was that woman who, she had to feed her kids. And so she she gave the security guard a hand job. So he let her take some food and didn't rat her out. I mean, it's like, that's happening. I mean, and look, you and I are in show business, so we see a lot of stuff, but I'm seeing a lot of people I know that are they're housing insecure, they're food insecure, and it's because they've fallen on hard times and really can't pick themselves back up. And it's not from lack of trying, and it's or it's something happened to them and they were underinsured. I mean, it's like I know, I'm not gonna say names, but it's like there are established comics who we both know, or know of at least, who are relying on a GoFundMe account to survive. Why? Well, because and these are established who had good careers, but they're underinsured, and they had a medical condition that requires a lot of treatment, and we have an effed up healthcare system, and times got tough over the past few years, and there was a pandemic thrown into all that. And so now that they need a GoFundMe account to survive. And, like I see stuff like that. And as a married guy, I get kind of scared because I'm like, well, gee, what if something happens to me? And my wife's in a situation like that, and that's, I mean, we're probably going to be leaving, and that's a big reason why, and I would never want to be in that situation.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Robert Pouquet, love Coin to the Moon. Thank you for supporting the show with the super chat. Very much appreciate that. Yeah, it's pretty gnarly, and I don't know, I don't know if we're gonna have the big, like, tanks in the streets kind of collapse, or we're just going to slowly just keep getting like what we're getting, where the wealth inequities just keep getting more and more, and there's just more, and there's just going to be wealthy people, living in gated communities with razor wire and armed guards, and everyone else is just out, just barely getting by.
I would, maybe 10 years ago, I would think, I don't think it'll ever get there. But now it's like, it just keeps getting, the yin to the yang, though, is you're seeing a rise in unions in this country that you haven't seen since at least the 80s. This is like one of the biggest it's been in at least 30 years, arguably longer. So, if that keeps up, well, then, there might be a middle class to reckon with, in which case it will be more of the latter. The empire is going to collapse, and it'll be a good thing for the world when it does. And if it's a gentle collapse, it'll be a good thing for most Americans, because you'll be living in a country that's just interested in being a freaking country instead of an empire. So everyone will be better off. But if it's a messy, well, that's not going to be good. That is not going to be good.
Yep.
So,
well, yeah, it remains to be seen. I hope it's not the bad one. I hope it's the slow one. But anything can happen, Ron. So,
right.
where can people follow you online?
You can follow me online, Twitter at Ron Placone, YouTube Ron Placone. My new podcast is called 1000 with Ron Placone. You can find clips on my YouTube channel, but also subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And ronplacone.com for some screenings for my movie. Left at Wall is going to be February 22nd in Tucson, February 29th in Omaha, Nebraska, March 20th in Washington, D.C., March 22nd in Pittsburgh, where I'm doing a show and a Q&A afterwards. So I'll actually be at that one in Pittsburgh. You can get tickets and information at ronplacone.com.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Please go to GrahamElwood.com. You can get awesome Political Vigilante merchandise, makes a great holiday gift. And please like, share, and subscribe. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button to this video. All those analytics help. And you can support what we do also at GrahamElwood.com. There is the P.O. Box if you want to support the show staying off the grid. And we have rockfin.com/GrahamElwood and patreon.com/GrahamElwood. Thank you so much. Follow the money, connect the dots, get the truth, and shave your knuckles for justice. Boom.